All right, who has a question in Burlington, Kansas?
What are the things behind you on the floor?
There's a lot of different things behind me on the floor, but I can show you a couple of them that are kind of neat. One thing we have here is a possible bag, it's called, because you can carry anything possible in it. It's made out of tanned leather, and it's beaded and quilled. So it's just kind of a bag. There's also one thing of importance I can show you. It's a piece of an elk antler with a, let me put this down, I can zoom in. A scraper. So this would have been used to like scrape the flesh off of a hide. So one more question from this, and then we'll move on to the next. Somebody go ahead and ask the question. One person.
Push your mic. Push your mic button on. And then talk.
Did the children go to school?
The children there was no formal school like you and I would know it, but at a young age, people would have been joined a society, and in that society they would have learned different things. The youngest society of men or boys might start learning how to hunt. Well, they'd be in that society for a few years, and they'd get together with the same age group of kids, and then after, I don't know, 3 or 4 years or 2 years in that society, they would get together and they would join the next society. So there are societies for everybody from young kids all the way up to the elders of the tribe. So there might be, 8 societies, and you'd spend a little bit of time in your life in each society, moving up one to the next. This kind of a form of schooling. So good question from Burlington. So now if we go to Curtis, Nebraska, and have a question from anybody in Curtis, Nebraska.
How many work on the earth building it?
That kind of cut in and out. I heard how many in Earth Lodge, but could you ask one more time?
Go ahead.
How many women would work on the Earth Lodge while they were building it?
Well, that's a terrific question as well. How many women would work on the Earth Lodge? It just depended on, maybe the size of the family, but there could be anywhere 10, 20 women working on an Earth Lodge. So it could be quite a big group, and that's one of the reasons why they would have been able to construct it so fast. I sometimes maybe liken it to Amish barn raising, in Pennsylvania. If they get together a whole group of people to put up a barn quickly. Could have been similar to that. You would have had a bunch of people working on a project. Another question from Curtis?
How many Earth Lodges would they have in a village?
Well, that's a good question as well. How many Earth Lodges would they have in a village? Some smaller villages may have 40, 50 Earth Lodges, where we have bigger villages. One we call here Big Hidatsa, which was occupied for over 200 years, and that had well over 100 Earth Lodges. And each one of those Earth Lodges had 15, 20 people living on it. You can think that's quite a few people living in one town, really, especially for around here. Still not a very populated area in North Dakota on the Missouri River here around Stanton. But one thing is for sure, back then in this area there was around 5,000 people living in these villages. Say when Lewis and Clark came here, 5,000 people lived in the villages right around where I'm at today. Well, now that's way more than live in this county today. So it was more populated back then than it is now. And one other thing that's interesting, when Lewis and Clark came to these villages in the early 1800s, there's more people living in Earth Lodges here than there were living in St. Louis or Washington, D.C. at that time. Something to think about. These are pretty big towns for back 200 years ago. All right, well, those are good questions. How about Jamestown, North Dakota? Any questions from the class in Jamestown?
I have a question.
Yes.
You guys are located in coal country, and there's been stories of settlers finding these exposed coal veins and burning coal. Would the tribes living up in that area before the settlers, would they find the coal and burn it?
That's a common question we get, and I'm sure that would have happened occasionally, but there isn't really a lot of documentation of that. I mean, I don't think it's a real common thing. They would have used maybe some, but not like the settlers would have for sure when they came to this area. They would have definitely, there's more oral histories and stuff about going out, getting the wood they need for their fire, but not so much the coal. Another question from Jamestown.
How much wood would they use?
Well,
For their fires or what?
For anything.
they would have went through a lot of wood, definitely. I mean, they would have been a fire, like say for a fire. I think they would have tried to keep it a lot smaller than like maybe when you guys go camping and have a fire. It's kind of fun to sit around. But if you had to haul that wood, from miles away every day to your house, you probably would have conserved it as much as possible. So they would have used plenty of wood, but they also would have conserved it as much as they could because getting it to your earth lodge wasn't an easy chore. All right, well, now Devil's Lake. We have a question from anybody in Devil's Lake, North Dakota.
We have one right here we'll start with.
Okay.
Where did they store the food in the Earth Lodge?
Where did they store the food? That is a terrific question, and I'll try to see if I can get a picture of it. Wrong way. With the camera. That is a great question. Well, let's see. There is a hole right there. Oh wow, we can see it. Good. There's a hole in the ground called a cache pit. It would have been shaped like a bell, and it would have been about 4, 5, up to 8 feet deep. That's where they would have stored all their food in the earth lodge. It's kind of like a root cellar. They would have actually had a ladder to go down there. They would have came up with their pots full of corn, and then they would have shut the door on their cache pit. There also would have been 3 or 4 of those that they would have had outside the earth lodge. So they may have had 4 of these cache pits at any time storing their food. Terrific question. Do we have one more question from Devil's Lake?
Yes, we do.
How much wood is in the Earth Lodge?
Well, they kind of, yeah.
There is a lot of wood in the earth lodge. I don't know it in terms of board feet, I guess, but that's a very good question. But there's many, many tons of wood here. Through most of it all would have been cottonwood, of course, and these ones that are the 4 center posts that you can see, they're pretty big around. The diameter, they talk about trees like the diameter at about 4 feet off the ground. They're probably at least 18 to 20-some inch trees. So they're pretty big. And these trees, something interesting, they would have probably usually been ones that would have been floating down the river during a flood season, and then they would have laid on the bank. That's when they would have got a lot of this wood. They wouldn't maybe went and cut a lot of it, but they would have salvaged a lot of it from flood. So those are 2 terrific questions from Devil's Lake. How about Williston? Do we have any questions from the folks in Williston?
How does a woman earn the right to build an earth lodge?
That's another